Well, thanks everyone for joining for Terrence Williamson Author Podcast number 4. Today we have Yasmin Sara Gruce. She's an editor, and I've used her in a couple of my books, and I thought I'd bring her on to have a quick chat about the process that she's been doing and just have a chat. How are you doing, Yasmin?
I'm good. I'm good. It's nice to finally meet you in this
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, all our past correspondence has all been through Instagram, or I think I found you in Upwork. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. How have you found working for Upwork?
Um, that's, actually how I started really taking editing from being something I did really on the side to something that I was doing full time. Upwork
Hmm.
is great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it connects me to anyone all over the world. You're in Canada, right?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different time zones. I mean, it's been a really cool experience to be on that website, and I find them to be very supportive too.
Oh, good.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is quite interesting because the last cover I did for the latest book, she's in Serbia. So it's quite neat to have people all over the globe. Because you're in the States, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I When I met you, I was actually in California.
that's right.
And then since we first worked together, I've moved back to New York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How'd you like it out in California?
I got there just a couple of months before pandemic
Oh,
started.
really?
So,
Wow.
so I liked California, but I don't think I really got to fully experience
Yeah.
any what it had to offer. But I did have a lot of sunshine
Mm,
uh, during a slow year. So
yeah. Did you get to see much out there? Like, did you do many like sightseeing or?
I did actually. My parents flew out from Brooklyn,
Mm,
and I met them in San Francisco, and then I drove with them from San Francisco back to LA.
okay.
So that was a really nice road trip with them, and we saw these amazing bodies of water with
Mm.
otters floating around, and
Oh, fun.
yeah, all the mountains. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been to San Francisco a couple times. Um, I'll always remember that. What is it called? Is it Fisherman's Wharf? No, or Pier something. Pier 39. Pier,
I don't know. I just walked around very briefly, but I think it might be Fisherman's Wharf.
maybe. Yeah. But I just remember seeing all the. Is it sea lions that they
Yes.
had? Yeah, and they're just sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ocean that they can go to, but that's funny.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so a bit of background for anyone who doesn't know. Yasmin helped me edit Mistress of Auschwitz and Righteous Fury.
Hmm.
Now, Mistress of Auschwitz, I didn't really have an editor the first time, and I found out the hard way. What's what happens if you don't have an editor? So Yasmin was fantastic and went through both of the books. Um, so I thought Yasmin just bring you on to chat to see what your process is. So what got you into editing?
So I was straight out of graduate school. I
Hmm.
graduated with a degree in literary theory,
Oh, well.
and my degree in undergrad was in English and literature and teaching.
Hmm.
So I had planned to be a teacher in high school.
Hmm.
After graduate school, I decided to teach college level courses, writing and
Hmm.
literature courses, and I did that for
Wow.
7 years. I don't know if this is something that goes on in Canada in the university system, but
Hmm.
out here, there's a system of like full time tenured professors and then adjunct professors. Um,
Right.
and so I was an adjunct for 7 years, which meant
Hmm.
I would teach two classes at one school, jump on the train, teach
Hmm.
another class at another school, and I loved it. But it was a little bit unstable. I
Hmm.
never knew what I was teaching the following semester. Sometimes I didn't even know if I had a class until the day before the semester started. So um, when I moved to California, I thought I would continue teaching, but then sort of decided while I was looking around that I would go on Upwork and try to see if I could get some clients for editing, because I had been doing that sort of through people that I knew in the academic world, editing mostly academic papers. And so then when I got on Upwork, suddenly I was editing novels. And I realized responding to literature, talking to writers, being part of a revision process was very similar to what I was doing when I was teaching.
Interesting.
Especially with so much background in analyzing literature. Every time I edit a book, I'm thinking about theme, I'm thinking about character, and especially with yours editing both books of the series, the first two, thinking about the connections and the parallels. I could have written an essay about it. So just using those different parts of my brain and experience made me realize that I love editing.
Wow.
And I right now very comfortable. Sort of, I'm pursuing it full time.
The girl I had on before, she does drama and stuff, and so she like right out of what they call secondary school, so high school. She went into university pretty much right after, if I got this right, and so then she pursued drama, and she's been in theater, and she has a few projects that they started, like Mad Camp Ireland and stuff like that. So it's fantastic to see people that are in something that they are passionate about and love. At the moment, I'm still an insurance adjuster, so fingers crossed that changes sometime. But
I'm waiting to see a Netflix or HBO ad any day for the Mistress of Auschwitz. Really, it's so cinematic. I mean, more than other books that I have edited.
That's kind.
Yeah, doing the things that you love, I think that's important. But it's sort of strange because during all of my time in the academic world, I remember while I was an adjunct, while I was teaching one of my main schools, I would go into the office, talk to the senior colleagues, talk to the administrators, and ask, what else can I do? Because it seems like getting a full-time tenure teaching position in New York City, I mean, it wasn't really working out. So I was like, what else can I do? And they're really the only other answer that I heard was continue studying, continue getting PhDs, stay in the academic world, or teach. But it sort of amazes me that then I fell on something that's actually quite perfect, and it's just something that the academic world doesn't really have a relationship with, especially the fact that the world of publishing, I think, has changed so much, which you can probably speak about at greater lengths. But we have a very untraditional world of publishing that exists now, and I love being part of it.
Yeah, it's really strange to see how it's shifted from the traditional publishing to the indie publishing. Like Amazon and up on other sites like Kobo and a bunch of different sites like that have made it so easy. Well, I guess there's a learning curve at first that I found pretty frustrating, but but it made it so easy for authors like myself to be able to publish, because I tried, I think with the first book, I tried maybe 150, maybe 200 different publishers, and they all rejected it. And so that's when I kind of started just going along the lines of self-publishing. I had a book out that I did first that was terrible that ended up unpublishing. It was my first try at historical fiction. It's not good. I enjoyed the story, but the writing side of it is just like, oh no, this has to go. So yeah, it is very interesting to see how it's moved from traditional to indie. But I think that a lot of the indie writers have made it hard for people like me, because I don't write nearly as fast as they do. Which I'm sure you've probably seen some indie authors. I don't know if this has been your experience, but you've probably seen them say like, how fast can you get it back? Like,
I just saw a posting on Upwork that was saying, I need someone to edit my book, and I need it edited in 24 hours. Because I've already, put my release date on Amazon. So
why?
and in the beginning, it's just when I started really using Upwork and working with a lot of indie authors, in the beginning there was a lot of really fast turnarounds. And that's what I was applying for, because with Upwork you also have to really develop relationships, get a lot of reviews to then have access to more jobs. And so in the beginning, I was taking all of those really fast turnaround projects. Now, if I go back and look back on my work, I realize that, I didn't do as well of a job as I would do today, because now I know that I need to read over a manuscript twice before I hand it back over.
Right.
Like, people aren't computers, so really like it. So now I always do 2 rounds of editing just for myself, so that I know that I've looked everything over, because you know how it goes. Even when you're reading, there's a noise outside and suddenly you're distracted. And then it's, a shame to have to work quickly to accommodate publishing deadlines that then,
Yeah.
there could still be mistakes. So
It's true. There's a famous, I can't remember who said this, but they always said there's always one last spelling mistake.
probably, I mean, and now, no, but now that I'm editing novels all the time, when I read a novel for pleasure, sometimes when I notice the typos, even, these huge major publishing companies, it's curious, and I
Yeah.
wonder if I wouldn't have noticed those errors before.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. The same with me. Like, I would have never picked up on a lot of the errors. I didn't pick up on a lot of the errors that I had in my book. And I just got the notice from Amazon, was it 2 days ago, that Righteous Fury had some errors that need to be fixed. That's just the fact of it, right? It's like you said, we're not computers. There's always things that are going to be missed. For the last book I did, Paradiso, I really regret the editor that I went with. I should have gone with you again. But because they had a deal on, and it was a big public, not a publishing company, but it's a really big editing company that had a big deal on. They had a bunch of services that they're going to give me. So I thought, well, I'll give a bit more money and get a bit more services. Yeah. And it was brutal. I don't want to say the name because I don't want to drag them through the dirt, because I know other people are happy with him, but the guy that did it, I think he did it within 24 hours. He just rushed through it.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of mistakes in that one. So I ended up getting another editor. And she was really nice. I really liked her. And then but there were still mistakes in that one, and then I ended up having another editor go through it. So there's 3 editors that went through it, and there's still mistakes, but it's just the fact that it is, right? It's just like, when our human mind, we just fill in words where there aren't words, or we it's just so natural to do.
Yeah, and then there's also the difference between hard grammatical errors and then playful experimentation with grammar and style. And that's something that I'm always sort of in between, when I'm working with an author. Sometimes if you change the structure of a sentence to make it more grammatically correct, suddenly the character doesn't sound like themselves.
That's true.
Yeah.
So in your editing process, do you mind walking me through your process? Like, do you use apps, or do you just print it out, or do you do it completely from computer?
So I use the computer, and what I normally do is do one read through. Sometimes correcting any really obvious, if there's an extra period somewhere or a word is spelled wrong, I'll correct it. But I'll just do an initial read through, just so I'm not caught up in the story while I'm also trying to look for errors. It also depends on what kind of edit. I mean, with you, we were doing copy editing and proofreading. But if I'm doing a developmental edit and I'm commenting on story, that I also might approach it a little bit differently.
Right.
But first, I'm really focusing on story, just so I have that background. And then I go back in and I use text tracking, Microsoft Word, to record any changes and comments that I'm making. What I all started to do in the last couple of months was take it a little bit slower, and I will highlight and write a comment for myself now. Sometimes that says, check back on this. maybe I'll write some notes for myself, so then when I go back, I will have had some time to think about the error that might exist there with some suggestions for changes, so I'm not just moving so quickly and suggesting things just, as I'm working.
Yeah.
So really slow things down, but text tracking is wonderful.
Yeah, I love it. I loved when you did that. That made it really easy. Because then on my
I wish I
side, like,
did that when I was teaching, actually.
uh-huh.
Yeah, I realized I'm, like, grading all of these student papers by hand, by the end of the day, it's like I can't even move my fingers.
So,
It's funny because when I was teaching, I was so behind on tech, like, using technology. I was using, like,
mm,
a roll book that I was recording their grades by hand,
mm.
calculator when I was doing the grades at the end of the semester, and now I feel like I'm much more high tech, and I mean, I just got a, wireless keyboard, I'm gonna get a monitor, so I think I'm gonna, like, start to enter the world of really working on the computer all day.
That's fantastic. So so then you got out of teaching right before the pandemic then, is that right?
Yeah, but that was just a coincidence.
Yeah. Wow.
So I didn't have to make the hard decision of whether or not Zoom classes were right for me. I mean, I think it's a totally different way of teaching, but
Mm.
I got married in the summer of 2019,
Oh, nice.
and my husband and I thought we'd go on an adventure. We had a long honeymoon driving
Mm.
across the US.
Oh, wow.
We ended up in California. We decided,
Mm.
let's just hang out here for a year, see what happens, because I had always
Uh-oh.
lived in New York City.
Hmm.
And so, we ended up there for a little bit longer than we
Mm.
expected to be, but it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like quite the adventure.
Yeah, we got a dog
Oh,
like
yeah?
every other
Yeah.
person during the pandemic. Yeah.
Nice.
Exactly, a year and
Oh,
4 months.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What kind of dog did you get?
She's a Belgian Shepherd,
Oh, fun.
so like a German Shepherd, very
Mm.
energetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been wanting a dog so bad. Our house just isn't big enough though, and we're expecting our third baby,
Wow.
so we so it's really not big enough. We're trying to figure out how we can fit everything in here. We're getting our carpets redone in the basement, so we're just going, oh my goodness, how can we like rearrange everything so we can uh, so we can move and not hate each other.
Oh my god, yeah.
Oh, that's fun. Um, so for the text on Word, the text tracking, I loved it. It's so helpful as an author, like on my side, because you can just like go through and then it's really easy because you can just like accept a change, or if there's a change that you don't want to have done, like if there's something that you saw that you're like, I'm not sure if what you meant by this or something like that, then you can just say, reject it or accept it or change it. It's such a good little program they got on there.
And just for, being able to have a dialogue
Hmm.
between an editor and an author without, let's say, marking up a huge stack of papers by hand,
Hmm.
mailing it, and then having you call and
Hmm.
go over every change.
Yeah.
This can be, and used to, I'm red and you're blue, and then we can have a little conversation on the document itself. And then ultimately, it also puts the decision in the author's hand to accept or reject a change,
Hmm.
which I think it is great too, because then, if I sent out my book to have somebody
Hmm.
mark all over, and suddenly there were things that were changed and I didn't even know what was changed, I would feel
Hmm.
maybe a little bit like I didn't have control over what was
Right.
happening to my book. So I think that that's always really important to me too when I'm editing, that
Hmm.
if it's not a typo
Hmm.
or a really obviously misspelled word, I prefer to use comments and explain, like, oh, how maybe this word would really
Hmm.
work better here, for
Right.
this reason, so that, it's a person's book. They put everything they had into it. I don't want to
Hmm.
just change things based on my own perspective and opinion, so.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that I really got from teaching, is the
Okay.
value of leaving feedback and comments that are clear, that aren't full
Mm.
of jargon,
Mm.
that are just opening up a dialogue about a sentence, about a word, about a choice, so that ultimately the author himself has, is making the
Mm.
decisions about their book.
Right. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer line editing or sorry, what's the other one? Um,
We have
um,
developmental editing.
developmental, yeah.
Developmental editing is commenting on story, plot, big picture elements of the book,
Mm.
while also maybe thinking about style, tone, narration.
Mm.
Line editing is looking line by line, focusing on style, voice. Copy editing is very similar,
Mm.
but has to do more with the mechanics
Okay.
of language. And then proofreading is just making corrections. And
Mm.
I think it depends on the week.
Mm.
Sometimes if I had just finished a really huge developmental editing project where I was really thinking about character and the order of the chapters and maybe huge chunks of the book that needed work, then sometimes somebody then sends me a request for proofreading. I'm like, okay, great. Now I can really just focus on grammar and language. But then after that, I'd probably want to do something a little different.
Mm.
That's why it's also I'm not a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, so do you think you're going to move towards specialization in terms
Mm.
of genre?" Like if
Right.
I said I'm only editing historical fiction now.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me thinks that might be a good idea. But then
Mm.
it also it keeps things interesting and I end up reading genres and engaging with books that I might not
Mm.
normally read. Um,
Mm.
even
Interesting.
nonfiction, self-help. Like I really
Mm.
like engaging with all like every kind of genre because I think,
Mm.
I mean, your book is historical fiction. It's also a thriller. It's also
Mm.
suspenseful. It's also there's some elements of even like romance, right? Like
Mm.
there's so much
Mm.
that I that's why I don't want to
Mm.
narrow myself down to one genre because then
Mm-hmm.
no, I don't. I think genre can be played with. So I like infusing all of the elements of all of the genres I
Mm-hmm.
engage with together.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Because I was thinking too, because the next one that I'm writing, do you know, have you ever heard of Mata Hari? She was an erotic dancer during World War One. Really fantastic story. So that's my next book is going to be about her because she's a dancer and spy at the same time. It's really fantastic. Um, and so that's going to be another historical fiction. And then the one I just did after this series, the Mistress of Auschwitz trilogy, was a historical fiction as well. So I'm kind of going, oh, do I want to box myself in to historical fiction, or do I want to try and branch out? But it's
Well, but as an author, because I don't write novels,
hmm,
it seems it seems like if you are able to be inspired by interesting, dynamic people who have existed in our world
hmm,
and the events surrounding them, then that's great.
hmm,
Instead of deciding, oh, I'm just going to invent a character in a
hmm,
setting. If that's not how you are inspired, then
right.
I don't know. I think you're very good at really writing historical fiction.
Hmm,
Being able to write a scene, what it sounded like, what it smelled like, how other
hmm,
people were reacting. I think it's incredible
hmm,
that it could actually really connect to what was going on. I have
hmm.
a lot of family who were in concentration camps.
Right. You mentioned, yeah.
And every time, and my grandmother, as she gets older,
Hmm,
she ended up my grandmother was very young, under
hmm.
the age of 5,
Wow.
when the Nazis were occupying Austria.
Hmm,
And she and her mother and sisters were able to leave and go to Cuba.
hmm,
But just, she's starting to talk more about that period of time as she's getting older. When I was younger, I didn't hear much about it. But then that's why I really also loved working on your book, because I felt like you were not turning people who have suffered so much into caricatures of themselves for the point of entertainment. Like, I felt like the way you wrote about all of the women who were sharing the space in the camp, and how dynamic they were, even the minor characters. You didn't just sweep over and then we have this just stereotype of a group of people, like,
Right.
and that's probably not easy to do.
Well,
So
that's very kind. I appreciate that. I can't take all the credit. Most of the credit is due to my wife, because she's such a sweet content editor.
she
Yeah, she was really good, because there's a lot of things, just writing as a man writing from a female perspective. There's some things that I'd write that she would go, a woman wouldn't think like that, or a woman wouldn't maybe be as simplistic as a man might be. So there's some cases, like I'm trying to think of the Mistress of Osher. I'm trying to think of an example, but it was so good to have her, my wife, as a content editor, because she'd drop those things and they'd be like, maybe you should say this, or maybe she should think that, or feel that, or maybe she'd be focused more on this part, instead. So it was fantastic to have her to do that.
Yeah. Something that I think we don't really hear about so much is all of the, every author on the New York Times bestseller list. Many of them didn't just sit alone and
Yeah.
write a masterpiece and then have one editor, fix up a few mistakes and then it was sent out, right? Like, the number of people involved, every conversation they had, the drafts they were showing to their friends and family. These are things that are so behind the scenes that then I think there's sometimes a lot of pressure on writers to just like produce a perfect book, when I don't know. Most books aren't written alone.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
very true. Yeah, I think this kind of sounds strange to say, but I think there's a level of humility that is required. It's like that guy, I don't know if you watched the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he says, I too am extraordinarily humble. But so I think there's a level of humility, because like whenever I write a chapter, I'll go through it myself, I try to edit it, and then I read it to my wife, and then sometimes it sucks. Sometimes it does. It sucks when it's like, oh, I don't think this is good, or this should change. It's like, oh, darn it, I wish it was perfect first time through. But it is such a benefit to have that sense of humility, that maybe, okay, so this is where I need to change, and then in the end you end up with a better book because of it. So
Yeah.
Do you mind if we chat quick about your family?
Oh, not at all.
That'd be great. So do you know which camp they were in?
Um, I'd have to ask. It's my grandmother and her sisters and her mother and her father managed to get out of there. She had she had some siblings, some cousins who ended up fighting um with England.
Okay.
But I'd have to look. My mom's side of the family, we have a book probably this big that the family has put together on the entire
Wow.
family tree, where everyone ended up, and
Wow.
it's in Brooklyn, but I'd really like to see it. My husband bought me a 23andMe as a gift,
Nice,
which I
awesome.
thought, yeah, well, when I got it for him, he has, his mom, there's some Mexican native,
Wow.
like, really, it was really eye-opening for him to see, like, where his family ended up in the States and where they came from
Wow.
in Europe. And so he loved it. So he got it for me, and I was like, okay, like, I'm pretty sure, at least my mom's side of the family has meticulously done this work, partly because of the impact that the Holocaust had and World War II had on the family, and how important it was to record.
Yeah.
It's not a family full of secrets, it's a family that's just really likes to talk about where we came from, where everyone ended up. I have a lot of family in Canada, actually.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
They all have red hair,
Nice.
the Canadian side of the family. Um, so then I ended up doing the 23andMe, and basically, you know, I remember when my husband Eric got his, there's a million things to click on, follow the map. I got mine, and it was one, you know, it's small region in Eastern Europe, both sides of the family, 100% Ashkenazi Jewish.
Wow.
It wasn't a surprise because that's something that my mom's side of the family has always been very proud of.
Yeah.
You know, this,
Hmm.
you know, like just very solid cultural
Mm-hmm.
line that exists. But yeah, I'd have to find out about exactly where, because it's a pretty huge family.
Yeah. And what startled me when I was looking at, I saw a map of all the camps. There's like thousands of camps. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. More than we
Because
know, more than we were taught.
mhm.
Yeah.
Because obviously you'd hear of Auschwitz and stuff like that, and that's the popular one. Popular is not the right word, but that's the infamous one
Most
that we hear about.
notorious, yeah.
Notorious, yeah. And so, like when I started doing this and I started finding out about all the different camps, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, because I didn't really know too much about the history, and so like the book that I was reading was just a portion about it was about Hans in the book when he starts hunting down some of the Nazis, because he was a German Jew as well. And so I was reading his book, and then there's 2 pages on Eleanor. I thought this is fantastic, these 2 pages. And so I found that there's nothing else written on her, so I gave it a shot. But yeah, just going into the history of it was just insane. Like it's so it's there's no words for it really when you look at it. Like I have some people that would, like when I'm advertising my book, I've got a few people commenting saying, why would anyone ever write a book about this? And I've been able to turn a couple of them around, because I said, honestly, there's so few of my generation who knows what happened or the extent of what happened, right? Some of the older generations, like the people who read my book, are usually between the ages of 55 and up. They have a decent understanding of what occurred, or at least a frame of reference for it. But my generation, you know, you kind of mention the Holocaust or Auschwitz or something like that, and they understand a tiny bit, but there's such ignorance for the extent of what happened.
Hmm.
And you know, and we learn so well through fiction, right? And so I'm
Absolutely. And the varied experiences, you know, like of a woman who existed, whose story was only on 2 pages,
mm-hmm,
in 2 pages of somebody else's book, you know, to be given that space and attention, you know, and
mm-hmm,
to understand that there were a lot of reasons, different reasons why people were in
mm-hmm,
camps.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true.
Um, None of them legitimate, you know, but
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of reasons nonetheless. So that's also, yeah, it's hard, you know, it's hard. People hardly even know about the history of their own country, myself
Mm-hmm,
included, you know, and as the days go on and as the years go on, there's sort of it is scary to think that we're going to be so far removed from the generation who
mm-hmm.
experienced um
Yeah.
what Eleanor Hodes and my grandmother and so many others experienced. So
Mm-hmm,
that's why I think it's writing historical fiction is an incredible thing to do, because what
mm-hmm.
you're doing is like preserving stories, preserving knowledge. So I think it's,
Right.
on top of it being an exciting protagonist and an interesting story, it's, you know, also doing a service
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
to be
that's
writing that genre. Yeah.
that's true. Um, well, my next one, it's not going to be as intense as the first, but I think, you know, I've started writing the book about Mata Hari, and I've never had so much fun writing a book. I just up until this point, I'm at a wall right now for how I'm going to end the first book, but I'm not as panicked as I used to be. You know, when I was writing The Mistress of Auschwitz, if I came to a point in the book where I was hitting a wall or a writing block, or I couldn't figure out the next step, I get pretty frustrated because I'm like, I'm sure other authors have no problem at all, and they just steam through. but but with this one, it's been pretty seamless, which is nice. But if you're right, I'd love to look into having you again for an editor.
Oh, absolutely.
Perfect.
And I
Uh,
also have to say that every year, just like, the more you write, the better of a writer you are,
mhm,
like as the years go on, I think I'm also fine tuning, like every time
mhm,
you understand a new rule of
mhm.
grammar, it stays there, and
Mhm.
so like I'm really excited to continue
Awesome.
working and yeah, continue working with you.
Oh, that's great. Well, speaking of rules of grammar, I cannot believe how many rules I break or I didn't know exist.
Yeah. I mean, and that speaks to also like I I don't know. I don't remember really sitting down in school learning
Mm,
rules of grammar. Like a lot
right.
of when it, and usually if you notice a sentence is wrong, it's because something sounds off. Like I think the advice I always gave my students was like read your essay out loud.
Mm,
If there's something that seems off, investigate, because I think that that's how most of us deal with issues of how we realize that there's an
mm,
issue with grammar, you know,
right.
something doesn't sound right. I don't know. And
Mm,
then you have there, but then you read books, there's so many writers out there who are breaking every rule,
mm,
every rule.
yeah.
So it's also like who gets to decide who's allowed to break rules in grammar, like if
Mm,
Amazon sends you a notice, like we noticed a few errors here. What if depends
mhm.
on the errors, but you might say, oh, that was purposeful.
Yeah.
Why not? So it's like music, it's like anything.
Mm. Well, it's funny because a few of my readers, or more than a few, I don't know why I've attracted this demographic, but a lot of them are retired English teachers.
Oh,
So there's a woman in the States, Johnny. She's fantastic. I absolutely love her. But then she ended up being one of the people to comment about the Mistress of Auschwitz about the spelling mistakes, and so then I ended up correcting it and or having you edit it, and I sent her a free copy, and now she's good friends with me, and she ended up being one of the line editors for my latest book, The Daughters of Marburg.
that's great. That's the thing about the indie publishing is that I think for a lot of readers,
Mhm,
that I mean if I wrote a review on someone's book that said I noticed a spelling mistake, then suddenly the author is sending me the revised book and we're having
mhm,
conversations about language and story. That's like a very cool relationship now that
mhm,
can exist between authors and readers.
mhm,
That maybe, that can I don't know. I'm sure we can all email
mhm.
any of our favorite authors, but we might not hear a response. Right.
Right.
But in the world of indie publishing, I think there can be more of an exchange and dialogue.
Mm,
If somebody was reading The Mistress of Auschwitz for a book club,
mhm,
you might even, pop in on a video call to answer questions that they have at the end of the book, which is something that we can't really access
mhm,
normally. So I really love this world of
mhm. Yeah,
publishing now.
it's so true. It's so true because I get messages. It's so kind. People are so kind. Um, it's weird that how we focus on the negative, but 99% of the interactions I've had with
Yeah.
people have been so positive. I got people sending me messages, saying that they loved it or something like that. Every once in a while, like maybe once every 3 months, I get someone commenting something outlandish. Nice thing is you can just ban them. but
Yeah.
but yeah, for the most part, it's been very, very kind. And there are some authors that I tried when I was doing some research. I wanted to follow up with some authors from different books that I was reading. I could not get a hold of them. Like I'd send
Yeah.
emails to their agent, and the agent said, "Oh, I'll pass it on to them," but I never heard back.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you're allowed to say anything about this or not, but do you have any horror stories from editing that you can share?
Hmm. Well, obviously not using any names, but I've had a few, there's been some themes, of experience. I haven't had one experience that was so horrible. I mean, part of the benefit of my job is if somebody is speaking to me in a way that is making me uncomfortable or upset, I can just log off, go for a walk. It's not like in-person interactions, I think can sometimes escalate to a different point. So I'm also very careful not to speak too quickly if I'm having electronic communication, because there's no rush. But yeah, I had a recent experience where there was an author who wanted a simple proofread. He sent me the book for me to estimate how much time it would take. And I was really excited. It was a book that I like, that's part of the plot. It really seemed very similar to like my childhood, my life in terms of setting, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And so I start to just scan the book and I notice that there's a lot of things that are inaccurate about Brooklyn in terms of even just the names of the trains and certain things like that. And I noticed that there might be the story, the character's name changed a few times just within the first chapter. So I wrote him back and I said, I'm really excited about this book, because I was like, but I think it needs more than a proofreading, because if I'm only making corrections to spelling and grammar, there's still going to be all of these other issues with the book. So I think it needs developmental edit. And he agreed that would be fine. So I did that. And mostly because I was excited about the book. I didn't even do it at the rate that I usually charge, because for some reason I was like, I'm the one who insisted, so I'll do this. And then he gets it back and he doesn't pay me. It took me like over 3 weeks. I worked so hard on this book. He doesn't pay me. Writes a review for me that says there are still errors in this book. And I said, of course there are still errors in this book. We did a developmental edit. This book got to be revised, and I looked back thinking, was I not clear? I was so upset. And then I realized, you win some, you lose some. And luckily Upwork provides like external support. But I think that's what's been the most tricky, is sort of, if I'm introducing a new service, I really need to make sure that the author or the client I'm working with understands what they're getting, because then I maybe just put in 3 weeks of work and it isn't what they wanted.
Yeah.
And so also not villainizing the people that I'm working with either, because I'm not a publishing company, my job is to explain to a client what I'm going to be doing with their book. And the better I get at that, the better success I'll have with projects. And 1 out of every 20 people might not be happy with the work that I do. And just like 1 out of every 50 people might read the book and say they didn't like it. It's part the world of reviews, that we're both in sort of different ways, but just not taking things too personally. But otherwise, no horror stories, I mean.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. That's a good, that's positive, because I was actually looking for, not for me, but for my wife to get into Upwork, because she does product photography. She's phenomenal. That's her niche. That's my wife to a T. She's so good at it. So she has a bunch of these like collector toys, right? I cannot believe the stuff that she can find. So we have a store here in Canada. I don't know if they're in the States now. Value Village. Do you guys have Value Village? No. So Value Village is kind of like a thrift store, right? So a bunch of people bring a bunch of what they perceive as junk. So my wife will go there and she'll find these things. So she found, have you heard of He-Man and like She-Ra and all those?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's old cartoon. She found a She-Ra doll that was there that someone dropped off. It was $400 that she sold it for on eBay. Like, it's just like crazy the amount of stuff that she can find. So she does a bunch of different product photography. So I thought that maybe we might get her going on Upwork for product photography and stuff, and see how that works. So I guess for me and for anyone else who's listening who might be thinking about doing some freelancing, you mentioned that Upwork is pretty good to use. do you have any advice for someone who's wanting to start out?
Well, part of the reason why Upwork is good to use, why it's different than other platforms, like, I don't know, Thumbtack.
Thumbtack?
Thumbtack is another one. Like,
Oh, okay.
so the reason Upwork is great is because clients will post what they need, and then you respond to that job post. It's like applying to jobs, you know. Other websites, you sort of have a profile and then wait for people to come to you. And that's less active, you know. You sort of are just like wondering, oh, I hope somebody messaged me today. I hope somebody needs an editor today, rather than just being able to scan and apply for jobs and write cover letters that are relevant to the job being posted. So that's partly why it's great, is that you can really infuse your personality into your profile and the way you interact with clients. It's not just like faceless, nameless resume sort of. I don't know. I really like it. It's there's the downside in a way is that just like there are jobs posted from all over the world, that means there are also freelancers from all over the world, and currency has different sort of value in different parts of the world. So I'm always aware that like there's someone who will edit a book for probably a tenth of the price, simply because the cost of living where they are might be a tenth. So that's part of it. It's a lot of I probably applied to hundreds of jobs and maybe hear back from just a handful of people. So it takes some understanding of that and not taking things personally if you know, you're not getting a lot of responses. And also, you know, for someone who's doing freelance photography, they might end up landing on a client who hires them for a 6-month-long job. Well, like for me, you're one of the only authors that I've worked with who's producing books consistently. A lot of people write a book, a couple years later, maybe they'll start thinking about writing their next book. So it's not like I have a group of 10 clients that I'm working with all the time. You know, every week I'm interacting with new people. So finding your niche and taking advantage of all of the workshops that Upwork also presents. And they really want to see freelancers succeed.
Good.
For such a large platform, that's really been my experience with them, that like, you know, there's constantly, every week I get another email about a seminar on posting projects and how to get more client feedback. So, you know, you get a phone number. If you call it, someone will answer.
Wow. Awesome.
Pretty great. So
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, because I used a few sites as well. I don't even remember which sites I used, but Upwork I've stuck with because I've had so much success, and yeah. But speaking of getting a bunch of different people from all around the world, because I posted for the latest book cover, and there's a couple people like they're sweet, really nice people, and unfortunately, what they did, for anyone listening, this is bad advice. Don't post work that's not yours. Because he posted these different cover photos, and one of them I was like, oh, that's a fantastic, I would love that cover. And so he said, okay, I'll give it a try. Don't, like, you know, like you put the payment, like the money in escrow. He said, don't do anything like that. So I said, oh, I have faith in you. If you do something like that, that's grand. So I put it in there anyways. And then he sent something back, and it was just, I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, this is nothing close to what it was. And so he said, yeah, those aren't mine. And so he was very nice. He's like, you know what? We'll cancel it. You can get the refund and find someone else. And I ended up finding that girl from Serbia. She was fantastic. But I was like, oh no. I was like, just like don't post something that's not yours, because then it's very misleading.
Of course. And that's the thing too. Like there's also a lot of job postings that seem like something's off about them too, and that's, you know, just coming through. We're on the internet, you know, the ethics of the internet we're also all adjusting to and trying to understand. Sometimes I'll get messages from people. I'd love you to edit my book. Just give me your bank account information and I'll put the money in. I'm just like, nope.
Wow.
No. But
Wow.
the first time that happened, it took me a second to realize. I was like, oh, great. Yeah, transfer it here. But my husband was like, no. Information. So, but it's cool because I didn't work remotely before editing, and I think it's just pretty incredible that I can work with people from all over the world and get to know them and feel like I have a personal relationship without actually having to travel into an office. And yeah, it's really cool. And these kinds of platforms are just able to connect people. I guess we live in a little bit of a gig world, gig economy, right? So
do you have when you edit, do you have like a certain spot that you go to? Do you like have a door, like a room, and you shut the door, no one's allowed to come in?
So ideally, yes. In California, I had an office in the house, but the space that I moved into, I live in upstate New York in a it's like a tiny cottage.
Oh yeah.
And there's no separation. It's two floors, but
Okay.
there's no separation of rooms. So I'll bring my computer. Sometimes I'll sit at the table. Sometimes I'll sit at the desk upstairs. Sometimes I'll go to the coffee shop. I mean, that's been once or twice a week now. I go to a coffee shop just to change the environment. And once the mosquitoes settle down a little bit, I'm hoping soon, because you go outside and there's a wave of mosquitoes right now. But maybe in the fall I'll be able to sit outside on the bench and yeah. And I sometimes when I go, if I take the train into New York City, it's like a 3-hour train ride, and I just work the entire time on the train.
Nice.
So, yeah, take it anywhere.
Yeah, there's times where I'll need absolute focus, but there's times where I'm all right if I can be mobile with it. But there's sometimes I just have to throw my headphones in and just shut out the world for a bit and focus.
Yeah, that's why I'm hoping. I mean, I don't know. This little cottage is so lovely. Aside from issues of like space to work, 2 of us, the big dog. If we expand anymore, we cannot stay here. And even like, but we're trying. But I think there's also might be nice one day to even rent an office space for myself. I think there's not even necessarily co-working, but there's a lot of spaces I could rent a small office, and that would be helpful, not just for focusing, but just so I can leave work and come home and not still be at work. There's something a little bit strange about eating breakfast in the same place that I hang out with my friends, in the same place that it's just good to leave work and be able to go home. Which I haven't had that in a while. So I'm always thinking, I mean, sometimes I'll get messages, especially because Upwork is a global platform. So sometimes I'll get a message at 10:30, 11 p.m. And I'm inclined to answer it because there's a lot of competition and I'm available. I got a message, it popped up on my phone. So I can say, sure, I'll get this sample back to you tomorrow. But it also makes it so that I'm basically on call 24 hours a day. And always thinking about work. And I also, end up working into the evening, and I'm not reading enough books anymore.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, with my job right now, working with insurance, we've been working at home. Well, since March, we had our lockdown again in my province, and then we've been working from home, and I hate that because, like, insurance, there's not always there's enough angry people that I don't like having that environment. Right? They're pretty upset with me, they're upset with insurance, so they take it out on me. But I don't like having that environment in the house. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
Because it's just like you said, it's like you need that separation.
Yeah. Yeah. So as nice as it is to like be able to, there's something about waking up, having a cup of coffee and not having to travel,
Mm-hmm.
be able to play with your kids or, hang
Mm-hmm.
out with your partner during the day. But like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's what I heard something last year that I really liked, like not working from home, but living at work. We've all just
Mm.
living at work instead. And
That's good.
my parents are carpenters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they have a 5-car garage
Mm.
workshop that's attached to the house, and they both are working. And so I basically have always grown up in an environment of living at work.
Mm.
I didn't have parents who like just came home at the end of the day and left the office and didn't care about, like their life
Mm-hmm.
is their work and their art and their clients and what they do. So
Yeah.
it's always been normal to me. And now my husband also is he makes furniture.
Mm.
So he has his own business. So I feel like we're all just living
Mm-hmm.
at work all the time and concerned, but there's something, like sure, if you love what you do, that isn't an issue, but I think it might still be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
When can you just not be concerned about productivity?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very true. Because they got us on a rotation now that the lockdown's over. So 1 week at home, 1 week back at the office. There's pros and cons to each of it. It's really nice to see people, but then during the day, I just spend most of my time talking to my coworkers.
Yeah.
I'm so chatty, so I'll just go chat with them, see how the day's going, what's new
Right.
with them and stuff, and then half an hour is gone. And it's like, oh damn. Where where at home, I'm just like glued to my desk. But
Oh,
um,
that's interesting. So do you feel like it's been like sort of more productive to work from home?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because I'm also the guy in the office that everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people come to for help, right? So they'll just stop by my office, ask for some questions about what to do with a project or a client or something. Like I get that sometimes as well from home, but it's a bit more invasive there, right? Because if they send you a message, then sometimes you can ignore the message for a minute and then respond to them, but then someone's standing right there beside you. You don't
Yeah.
have a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of lockdowns, I haven't really checked up on the news. How are things going in the States?
Um, it depends where you are. Something that I learned
Mm,
from even driving across with my husband and living in the West Coast and driving back is that this is a huge country
mm,
and each state is sort of like its own country.
mhm,
I don't, and I'm sure it's similar in Canada, but like
mm,
the where I am in upstate New York, I'm right on the border of Vermont.
mm,
Last time I checked, I think Vermont is sort of leading the way in success of keeping down
mm.
cases and hospitalizations. And I'm in a pretty remote area here, so
Okay.
it feels like things are going okay. But
Mm,
other parts of the country, I think the hospitals are really filling up, and that's the
mm,
main issue, right? I mean,
mhm,
that's one of the big issues because when the hospitals are full, then it makes it
mhm,
difficult to care for people in any way. So I think we're gonna enter an interesting year. I don't know what's gonna happen. I remember
yeah.
last year, things in the fall were sort of going well, and then once
Mm,
the holiday season started,
yeah.
things got worse. So
Mm,
not making any big plans, uh,
yeah.
but just sort of hoping for the best and hoping everyone stays
Mhm,
safe.
yeah.
My mom
I
came back from Israel.
Oh, okay.
My grandmother lives there in Jerusalem, so
Mm,
my mom was there taking care of her, and she
mm.
told me that they're doing booster shots there,
Oh, okay.
which I didn't realize. So
Yeah. Wow. So booster shots after the double
yeah,
vaccination?
I think it's
Okay.
6 or 8 months after the double.
Okay.
That's how they're doing things over there.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I have a friend I work with. He's from Mississippi. He works with us up here, and yeah, he has a lot of family back in Mississippi. And he said that they're having an outbreak out there, and he's worried about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got my second shot not too long ago, but I got both Pfizer, and they made me so sick.
Really? Yeah.
Hmm.
Both times.
Yeah, the first time was a bit worse, to be honest.
Same for me.
Oh, really?
The first after the first shot, I felt fatigue, like
Hmm.
just exhaustion, fatigue, headache. I couldn't lift my arm at
Hmm.
all.
Hmm.
I also don't think I ate enough.
Oh,
It sort of reminded me of. Do you have any tattoos?
no, I don't.
I have one tattoo, but it reminded me of when I went to get my tattoo. Nobody told me that you really need to have like a good breakfast and have fluids, and I felt almost the same way.
Oh,
Like,
really? Interesting.
yeah,
Good to know. I was actually thinking of getting a tattoo, so I'll have to keep that in mind.
yeah,
There's a tattoo I wanted, but my mother-in-law has it. And I love my mother-in-law, but I just don't want to have matching tattoos with my mother-in-law. um, yeah, I think the reason it took me down so hard when I got the first one, I got the shot, and then I ate. Then after the shot, I picked up some junk food. So we went to McDonald's and stuff, right? So I had a bunch of shit, and so I think that's what took me down so hard because I just didn't eat healthy enough. So
yeah, exactly.
with the second one I tried, and I did a bit better. Um, and stayed away from booze because I thought that'll help with the fatigue. So it was a bit better. Still had a couple days where there was one really bad day. I felt so bad. I love my mom, but I she was coming over to hang out with us, and so I texted her before she even got here. I said I'm just gonna be in the basement because I'm so grumpy. I don't want to end up saying something I
Yeah,
don't mean.
yeah.
So um yeah, but they're already doing the boosters in Israel. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we'll see. I think it's gonna be a. I mean, hoping that
Mm.
more people are just staying safe and healthy, but I think it's gonna be an interesting year
Yeah.
because so many people have now got. I don't know what it's like. Where you are, but here,
Mm-hmm.
all the mask mandates were lifted, and suddenly
Mm-hmm.
everybody was saying the phrase post pandemic, and so it's a little bit confusing. I think now
Yeah.
to sort of take steps back, even though we're all capable, But
Mm-hmm.
last year it was all new.
Yeah.
Now everyone's like, oh no,
Mm.
am I going to be baking bread again and only busted, like all those memories are coming back, and
Yeah.
just all my friends who are teachers also. That's
Mm.
really,
Yeah.
I feel bad because it's a different job, and I think that's probably true for
Mm-hmm.
so many professions,
Mm-hmm.
that it was just flipped upside down, like to have to really engage with technology and Zoom and learn how to interact with students. And I have one of my best friends is an elementary school teacher, and
Mm-hmm.
so she's a little, even though she prefers that she and the students wear masks because she
Mm-hmm.
understands that that's sort of the safest, best way to interact. She has a lot of she's a dual language
Okay.
teacher, so she has students who are both English native and Spanish native speakers in her class.
Mm-hmm.
And she just said that it's so difficult to communicate language with the mask on for, a 7 or 8 year old who's trying to learn English, who can't even see her facial expression.
Yeah.
She just feels like she's not able to do
Yeah.
her job completely correctly. So hopefully
Yeah.
things get better.
Yeah. I felt for those teachers because there's a couple for my daughter. Yeah, and they have to learn exactly. They have to learn Zoom. There's a bunch of different apps that they have to learn and stuff like that. And even now at my age at 33, I hate learning new things like new
Mhm.
technology and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, same. I'm 32. Yeah,
Yeah.
same age.
It's every time something new. So I can't imagine even like 5 or 10 more years added on to me and learning some new things. It just
Yeah. Well, then you have, there's tech savvy 85-year-olds out there, and I know that, but
Mhm.
a lot of the teachers who were maybe like a few years away from retirement just used to doing things the way they did it, and then suddenly, like,
Mhm.
this is what they were thrown in.
Yeah.
Students too, like a lot of students who just
Mhm.
it's not very dynamic to sit in front of a computer, I'm sure, all day. I can't imagine I don't know how I would have handled that
Yeah.
as
Well, yeah.
being stuck with my parents all day in my
Mhm.
room. Yeah.
The thing is, you're just not going to learn from your parent the same way that you're going to learn from a teacher. Like with my daughter, she was in grade 1 when we're doing this, and so it is all right because she wasn't too much in a routine. Right, it's the first year in school, so she's not got it stuck in her head. So there's some things that are okay, but there are some times that you had to learn how to be really patient because she did not want to learn from us. She learns from teachers fine, she's great at it, but she did not want to learn from us. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's just the dynamic. um,
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this was fun.
This is really fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So
be in
for
touch about anything.
what's that? Sorry.
Be in touch about anything at all,
Hmm.
anything
Yeah,
you're working on.
absolutely. That sounds great. Well, for people who are interested in getting some editing done, where can they find you?
So I'm on Instagram. My handle is Yasmin Sara Editing, which is the same as my website,
Okay.
yasminsaraediting.com. Yeah, my Instagram, I should be posting more and doing more, but I can't handle the reels.
Yeah.
And the Instagram is with from last year to this year is already a new and different platform, and I don't know, I'm having trouble keeping up with it, but I always like to, like, any books that are that I've worked on that are published, I always post about, and
Hmm.
yeah, any new packages that I have or updates to my website, I post about, but
Hmm.
I'm not yet in the posting videos
That's completely
stage.
one of the reasons why I started this,
Yeah.
because I hate doing social media. I hate posting. I hate updating, but
Mhm.
this I really love doing. So I was like, well, okay, well, let's see something that I like doing that I can kind of be active about on social media, because now you have to have a social media presence.
Yeah, exactly. And
So,
it's great, and I really like Instagram, just for, even I follow other editors and we talk and exchange
mm,
information, and authors that I've worked with. I love them, being connected to them on
mm,
Instagram and having a relationship where I can, like, see what they're working on, and it's very, very cool.
yeah. Well, like even like us, like I just sent you a message asking if you want to be on the podcast, and so you can just stay connected that way, which is fantastic.
Definitely.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was
Thank
an
you.
absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
And maybe in the future we'll do another one.
Perfect. Yes. Talk soon.
Sounds good.
Bye.